This module covers the status system field and what it represents in an issue. A status tells us the current state of an issue in its overall process or life cycle. In Jira, this is managed by a workflow. Statuses are the building blocks of a workflow. A workflow can be basic, consisting of just 2 or 3 statuses, or it can be complex, with many statuses and transitions between the statuses. The statuses available on an issue are determined by the workflow the issue uses. This is different to priorities and resolutions, which are set globally. The default workflows and statuses available to each project vary by project type or product. For example, when you create a new project in Jira software, it will use different workflows to a Jira Service Management project. In some workflows, you might see the statuses resolved and closed. The difference between these two statuses is not obvious, so let's define that here. Usually, the resolved status means that work has been done on the issue, but a final review is needed. When this review is complete, the issue can be transitioned to the closed status. An example of when this workflow could be used is when a bug is fixed and marked as resolved, and the tester gives it one last review before marking it as closed. Or in a service desk project, a ticket is resolved, and if a customer doesn't reply to it, it automatically gets closed after a few days. It's safe to say that if your process doesn't have this review cycle, you don't need to keep both statuses. When editing workflows, you might encounter the term step. Let's consider steps and statuses and familiarize ourselves with each. Steps are points in the structure of a workflow that signify the various states an issue can be in. We commonly say that a workflow is composed of statuses, but it is actually made of steps. However, you only see the steps in the text workflow editor. Statuses are the visual representations of steps. They are the blocks you see instead of steps when working in Jira. They add visualization to a workflow by adding colors to a status and associating statuses to status categories. Statuses appear both in the text and visual workflow editors. Next, let's consider what we can do with statuses. While changes in resolutions or priorities do not appear in Jira's audit log, this is not the case for statuses. When a status is created or changed, an entry appears in the log, explaining who performed the change and when. Statuses also have their own workflow properties. You can, for example, make an issue uneditable or editable only for some roles while in a certain status. Finally, just like priorities, issue types, and resolutions, statuses can have a custom translation. And why use statuses? Well, the purpose of statuses is to let users know the next step they need to take with the issue, like when it is awaiting review or in testing. This means that as a part of a workflow, statuses help users understand what they should do next. Jira uses a visual guide for statuses. Each status has a different color: gray, blue, and green. But what is the significance of the color? The colors represent status categories. Gray statuses are from the to-do category, which equates to states in which work hasn't yet started. Examples of these statuses are new, to-do, or backlog. Blue statuses are in the in-progress category. These statuses, such as in review, in progress, and pending, tell the user that work is taking place on the issue. Green statuses have a category of done, signifying that there is no more work to be done on issues in this status, with examples being resolved, done, or closed. Status category names are similar to some statuses you find in Jira. And why might it be helpful to use status categories? The categories explain to the user the stage of the process the issue is in. They help users sort, filter, and report on their project work and identify where issues are in their lifecycle, particularly in places where a large number of issues are rolled up. Next, we'll consider status categories and where they are used. Status categories are used in the backlog of an Agile board. There we see how many story points belong to issues that have statuses in each of these categories. You can also use status categories when searching for issues. A JQL query like status category equals in progress displays all issues with blue statuses. This is especially useful when in an environment with many statuses, as you don't need to search for every single one. This query can be used in Kanban boards, dashboards, or when fixing resolutions. We already mentioned that statuses are used in a workflow. The issue status enables reporting. So how do you get the most of statuses? Where can we visualize statuses in the Jira user interface? You can, of course, review the status of each issue on the issue itself. Or you can create a filter displaying a custom set of issues that help you see their statuses in one place. You can then add this filter to a dashboard using the Filter Results gadget. Many apps use statuses for various project statistics. For example, to see the percentage of completed issues in a project. When building a workflow, statuses need to have a logical order that is easy to understand for every user. Here, we see a workflow using a correct, logical order of statuses on the left. On the right, we have a poorly defined workflow where statuses appear in a more random way. A workflow is developed from a business process that's translated to Jira. It should also follow the status categories. A workflow must always begin with a gray status, progress to one or more blue statuses, and end with a green one. It must be the team that decides what each status means. A lot of statuses are very clear and their meaning is quite obvious, such as resolved or to do. However, take review, for example. Is this intended for a review before the team starts working on the task or after? How about assessment? What does that mean? Or reopened? What is the difference between reopened and open? It's down to the team to agree on first the meaning of each status, and second what happens when the issue transitions to that status. You can find a repository for all your statuses in the Issue Attributes section of the application administration. There, you can create, edit, and remove statuses. Let's take a look at how this works. Let's first review which users can add, change, or remove statuses. The Jira administrator can modify any status and any workflow. A user that is a project administrator, meaning they have the administer projects permission, and additionally has board administrator permission, can add new statuses onto the board. This is, of course, only in a Jira software project using a simplified workflow. The statuses created from the board are not only available to that one project. They can be used in other projects, just as though a Jira administrator created them. Finally, with Data Center, there is a special permission called Extended Project Administration, which allows project administrators to create statuses for the workflows the project is using, if the workflows aren't shared with other projects. Let's look at creating a new status. You can add a new status through the Status repository in the Issue Attributes section of the administration. There, you will be asked for the name of the status and its description. The description will appear in the Status Administration area and elsewhere, such as the Advanced Search window as a tooltip. You also need to select a status category, and if you're using Jira Data Center, a status icon. Another way to add a status is when editing a workflow as a Jira administrator. When you add a new status there and fill out the name and description, Jira will also ask you if you want users to be able to transition to this status from any other status in that workflow. In other words, if it should have a global transition. As we mentioned, it's also possible to add a new status in a board belonging to a software project with a simplified workflow. No matter how you create this status, it must have a unique name. Special care needs to be taken when naming statuses. Statuses should have short, generic names so that they can be reused in various workflows. Good examples are in review, to do, or resolved. These status names can be used universally. On the other hand, a status like awaiting third-level review has a very limited use, if any. If too many of these statuses are introduced, standardizing and reporting will be hard, and administration overhead becomes burdensome. Use the present tense when naming statuses. Showing users that the issue is in review right now or in testing clearly indicate what is or should be happening, whereas using a past tense like reviewed or tested tells them what's already happened. Green statuses like resolved are an exception, as they appear at the end of a workflow where no more work is to be done. While you can change the name of a status, it's best to do so when it's either new or not used as much. That's because if any users have created filters or boards using the name of the status, their search results will stop working. If possible, always choose a name that won't need to be changed. Finally, as we already mentioned, choosing the right status category is extremely important. As an example, take the Finish status. Should it be green or blue? Once you select green and place it in the Done category, it will appear this way across Jira. This reduces the options for when and where you can use such a status again. Next, we'll look at areas to consider when changing statuses. Statuses cannot easily be deleted from Jira. You must check to see if they have been used or are in use in a workflow. If you delete a status or change it, it will not automatically be updated. If a status has been used, it needs to be removed from all workflows, including inactive ones, and replaced manually. If you change a status, for example its name or category, it changes everywhere. Care should be taken when making this change, as every workflow that contains this status will be impacted. This is why there's a list of workflows displayed in Status Administration indicating where the status is used. You can also change the order of statuses. This order is used in the two-dimensional statistics or issue statistics gadgets, where the statuses are sorted by the order they are defined in the status area of Jira administration. Let's look at common status-related pitfalls. The first example covers the situation where you have identical statuses, or at least very similar ones. This is problematic because it's difficult to decide which status to use, for example, when building a workflow. Standardizing and reporting is also difficult. If one issue is in the In Progress status and the other in the Work in Progress status, should they be compared? Or do they represent the same state? This may also occur when you have two identical statuses, but in different languages. Which one do you use? The solution is to perform a status cleanup. But how should you perform the cleanup? First, remove all statuses in languages that are different from the one most used in your Jira, and merge them with statuses in the dominant language used in your Jira site. Replace them in the relevant workflows and use the status translation feature instead. Then, standardize the active statuses. As with the translated statuses, you will need to remove those that aren't used as much and replace them with more general alternatives. For example, the Work in Progress status can be easily replaced with just In Progress. The outcome of this should be a small set of default statuses that are used in building various workflows. Of course, there might be cases when a new unusual status is needed, but that's only when no other existing status can replace it. Another problem related to statuses might be that you cannot work with an issue. You can't add or change what is in the issue fields, for example. We already mentioned that statuses can have properties. In this case, they might limit editing so that the current user cannot edit an issue in a certain status. This, for example, applies to the closed status in default Jira workflows. To see if this is the case, check the workflow of the affected issue and the properties of the affected issue status. Another problem might occur on boards. Issues either disappear or aren't placed on the board at all. The solution might lie in the configuration of the board. Are all statuses correctly mapped to the board's columns, or are some missing in the Unmapped Statuses section? Sometimes, issues in certain statuses might be excluded from the board entirely. That's why it pays off to review the board filter too. The third option is that resolved issues disappear from the board after some time. This is a default setting in Kanban boards. You can see if this is the reason for the error by reviewing the Hide Completed Issues older than option in the board's configuration. Another reason might be that the Set Resolution option is not set in the board's column settings. The last issue can affect filters, dashboards, and boards. In this case, Jira software boards might appear empty and dashboard gadgets, not retrieving the filters they are based on. The filters themselves might not load issues at all, and instead display an error message. One of the reasons for this might be that part of the search query contains a status that has been removed. When this happens, filters show the error. The value does not exist for the field status. Dashboard gadgets will not function. They will appear empty and boards won't load any issues, as their filter becomes invalid. The problem can be solved by checking the filter used for each of these objects and looking for a reference to a missing status in the query. In this use case, we have a challenge. When filtering out issues based on statuses across projects, we don't see all the issues. What could be the problem? If you would like to walk through the use case, you can follow it through using the PDF solution guide that we have provided. In this walkthrough, you'll be trying to understand why an advanced search does not return the expected results. Let's pause for a knowledge check on status categories. Identify the correct statement. A. Status category colors are editable. B. Status category names are editable. C. A status can be associated with one or more status categories. D. Status category is optional. Or E. Status category is a field that can be used for advanced queries. The answer is E. It is possible to perform an advanced query using the status category. A is incorrect. Status category colors are not editable. B is incorrect. Status category names are not editable. C is incorrect. A status can only ever be associated with one status category. D is incorrect. Every status has a status category. E is correct. Status category is a field that can be used for advanced queries.